that's an uncomfortable truth for many people to understand, that actually a machine can do many of the things that I can do better than me. It's like a very rare time in history, and that speaks volumes about change. AI as an artificial intelligence is not new. But what is somewhat new is the term generative AI. Nearly 2 years ago, ChatGPT was introduced to all of us in a consumer sense. Everyone in the world went, wow, this is new. Suddenly, AI is a real augmenter, and it's now enhancing the creative process from concepting through to post-production.
So you don't see AI taking the role of the creatives?
That I would say to our creative teams and designers that I think the art of what you do and the skill you possess now will be redundant in 3 years.
So you say that?
Yes, I say this publicly, and I'm okay, but my job is to then support and help them and show that there is space to fail.
Hi everyone, welcome to Beyond Marketing, the podcast. I'm Maira Genovese, the CEO and founder of Engine Power Global Integrated Market Agency. I'm so excited to this episode where we're going to be discussing the complexities of leadership in the digital age. We're going to be exploring strategies, how to navigate disruption, how to foster innovation, and most important, we're going to be talking about how to learn to navigate the future of generative AI. And to talk about that, I am so excited to dive into this topic with Oliver Yonchev. Oliver is an entrepreneur, a speaker, and he's currently the CEO and co-founder of Flight Story. With a track record of scaling business, he's a pioneer when it comes to innovation. Oliver brings invaluable insights into the leadership, into the innovation, and mostly into the future of marketing in the digital age. I've known Oliver for almost a year now. I would say a few months, almost a year. And he's a great inspirational person, and I could not be more excited to have him for the first time with me at the Beyond Marketing podcast. So welcome, Oliver. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
I'm excited to be here, and I feel I need that introduction every single time I walk in a room. That was wonderful.
Oh,
Very
right.
kind.
No, you're kind. Thank you so much for the time, and I'm happy that I get the surname that I always struggle here on my podcast.
You had a few practices though.
I had it before, so it's good. Thank you so much for the time and for being here. It's been a while that I don't record a podcast, so it's been almost like 6 months, and now it's like I could not have been more grateful to come back into the studio having you as my guest.
No, it's a real privilege, and I hear it's like riding a bike, so you should be fine.
Amazing. So thank you so much. I'm very excited about, talking to you today. I've been seeing you, in so many, you have your own podcast, which by the way, it's amazing. I've learned a lot from just every time you post on your social medias. And I've been seeing that you participate in a lot of different talks and panels recently. Yep. All around the world, and one of the themes that it's kind of, for my perception, is very predominant on every talk you do is about generative AI. So I would love to kick off our conversation around this theme, because I feel like you're kind of ahead in terms of how this will be disrupting the industry of marketing, how brands and agencies can actually, leverage from generative AI. And so I'd just like to start with overall thoughts on that subject.
Yeah, of course. So I spent probably the last 10 years of my career largely in social media. And I would say I've been a benefactor of social media becoming increasingly important in the world. And probably the best anecdote I have to share is when I was 25 years old, I went into Coca-Cola. I told the CMO that everything that they were doing was wrong, and she listened to me. It's like a very rare time in history,
Okay.
and that speaks volumes about change. So I've been a benefactor of getting used to the world changing around us, and change presents a lot of challenges and there are unintended consequences. But change for me has always been an opportunity. So I've been of the belief when you sense something new, shiny new toys, new opportunities, new technologies, I believe it's good to focus energy, headspace, and be curious about what could come next. And then probably in the last 3 years, the conversation around AI evolved a lot. So AI as artificial intelligence is not new. The term artificial intelligence was coined back in 1967. So you're talking a long time ago. But what is somewhat new is the term generative AI. And it really starts from a breakthrough in 2017 in large language models. And I suppose the way I describe the breakthrough is language is universal. And when we think of language, we think about geography. We think about different territories. Language is everything. Language is text to sound to video to DNA. So when we had a breakthrough in large language models back in 2017, it meant that every single field of artificial intelligence started to advance at a rapid pace. So this was a catalyst moment. And then, going on nearly 2 years ago, ChatGPT was introduced to all of us in a consumer sense. Mm-hmm. And this was the first touch point where I think everybody in the industry or just everyone in the world went, wow, this is new. This is better than anything I'd seen before. This is really interesting. And this started what I call the generative era. And if I think of AI, maybe for the last 15 years, AI has been largely embedded in our worlds to automate things, to automate processes and systems. And it's been used to rationalize huge amounts of data and curate better experiences for us. So, for example, it's the reason that your Netflix looks different to mine, because of AI algorithms powering a recommendation based on what it believes is relevant to you versus me. Social media is exactly the same. Recommendation engines, AI powered, that are serving us content that's relevant for me based on my wants, needs, and desires. What generative AI fundamentally does is moves us from an era of curation to an era of creation, meaning we're creating new things in real time. And I started maybe about a year and a half ago getting immensely deep into the world of AI. And I don't have a technical background. I know the basics.
About to ask, yes.
Yeah, but I think in marketing, the marketing industry is all about understanding new technologies, understanding innovation, and then figuring out how do we apply it to the things that we do. Because what we do, it never changes. We're there to, promote products and services and communicate ideas as effectively as possible. And the technology never changes that. We're always connecting with the person.
Exactly.
But what generative AI can do is it opens up a whole range of new possibilities that didn't exist, just a year ago. And I think from some of the examples we see flooding LinkedIn, the things that we see happening, not just in the ad industry, but across every field, I describe it often as just magic. I think there's some wonderful things happening.
And are you applying that within your business, the generative AI? And if you are doing it already, how are you doing this? Through creative, through script?
Yeah, through a lot of things, actually. So my fundamental belief is that, and I get asked this a lot, how are brands using AI?
Using AI, exactly.
It's a question, and I always go, I think it's the wrong question. For me, great use of AI is invisible. AI is just a technology. I think in 3 years, we won't be mentioning the word AI. It'll just be intelligence. It's embedded in everything we do. So, when you see something and it's being created by AI, whether that's an image, there's a thing called an uncanny valley. It just doesn't feel right. It feels a little bit off. And one of the things that human beings, we create value is, it's the craft, it's the art. People have a problem conceiving that. So in our workflow, when I think of how it's impacted us, I think there's 3 prime areas. One is productivity. And there's an area of AI called automation agents, which is effectively AI tools speaking to other AI tools. Because right now, a lot of the technology is very narrow. It does one thing really, really well. For example, you can do transcripts of this conversation, and then you can then use that transcript, pass it to another AI to do something else, to then pass it to another AI to do something else. So one of the areas we've been exploring internally is a lot of automation stacks in our workflow, whether that's strategic marketing, whether that's the creative process, or whether that's in our performance marketing workflow. So we've done a lot of testing, experimentation in that area. The next piece in creativity is post-production. So we've seen, I'll give you one example. We were doing a project with Google. The day before we were about to do a shoot, one of the speakers fell out. So we had to move on to a remote production. We then got the footage back from the remote production and it wasn't a good enough quality. So what would have been the impact to that brand? It would have been a reshoot, a delay in project, a delay in time, and none of those things were possible. What we were able to do in post-production was create an avatar of the speaker. So we recreated the speaker, his likeness and image. We changed all the scripting in post-production and did voice synthesis. We didn't have to do a reshoot, and we managed to deliver the project on time. So in that one instance, that was one large production that we didn't have to do again. But fundamentally, the outcome is no one would have known. So that was using AI in post-production. There's another area our creative teams use. So one of the limiting factors of creativity is different perspectives. You know, as humans, we live in our head. We all live in our head. And one of the great things about AI is now you can get an infinite amount of perspectives on any given topic. So if I want an AI to support me in the creative process and represent a certain community, a certain group, a certain perspective, I can now do that. So suddenly, AI is a real augmenter, and it's now enhancing the creative process from concepting through to post-production. And honestly, it's blowing my mind, but it's very new in terms of,
so
the areas.
you don't see AI, taking the role of the creatives, the strategist team, because there is a lot of conversation saying, is AI is going to be able to do the generative AI, able to do the work that a design does, the work that a creative does. But the way you are positioning here, it's much less about taking away their talent, but actually enhancing and leveraging from AI for efficiency, for agility, and for more opportunity. Because that is the big conversation right now, right? Oh my God, what's going to happen with the role of creatives and design? But I feel like the way you're explaining how you're already using it, it's in a very positive direction.
Yes and no. I'll tell you why yes and no.
Okay.
That's today.
Yeah.
Today, it's augmenting what we do, but the rate of change and the accelerated pace of how exceptional these tools and programs are becoming basically only leads me to one conclusion.
Which is?
That many of the things that we are doing now, we will not need to do. That's an uncomfortable truth for many people to understand, that actually a machine can do many of the things that I can do better than me. And the question then becomes, well, what does that mean for my role? My optimistic view is what you described. I think we'll have more opportunities to spend time on tasks that we get fulfillment from. And, if you think of that, just take design, for example. The design process, now a lot of designers will spend a lot of time on executing, the craft, the technical skills. When you make the technical barrier, when you lower that barrier, suddenly you still need a great creative to know what to ask for. You still need a great creative to orchestrate and make sure it aligns with the brief and the insight and the vision. But fundamentally, the execution, the time-consuming bit, probably will be done in large by technology. And that's the truth. So I think when you look at any really meaningful innovation wave throughout society, jobs are always lost in many cases. Jobs are also created. And most of all, jobs just evolve. That's the main thing. So I think why I'm optimistic about the marketing industry, and we work with so many talented strategists, thinkers, creatives. And as an industry, we're so used to trying new things and evolving. I think we're really well placed, way more than other professional services, to adapt. I was speaking to our lawyers, and they took me out for a nice lunch, and we spend way too much money with them. So it was great. I don't even drink wine, but I ordered the expensive wine. It's like, we give you way too much money. And they were like, yeah, we've played with this. It's helping some things. And I said to them, you're finished in a few years. 90% of what you do, meaning you charge for your time and you speak a language that others don't. And right now, that's going to disappear very quickly. Your role will be bringing people to a table, negotiating the human art of all the aspects, but the technical arts are all going to disappear. And they were like, they laughed, and I was being deadly serious. I'm like, you're finished. Because ultimately the machines can do it faster, they can do it better. When you look outside of marketing, take some of the more meaningful aspects and professions like medicine. AI has been used to identify and screen certain types of cancers with a greater accuracy than a human clinician. That is mind-blowing.
This is mind-blowing.
It's mind-blowing. Think of all the applications for sourcing and identifying gene defects. It really is revolutionary in healthcare. It's revolutionary in so many other things. And I think what we do when we talk about using ChatGPT to help us on LinkedIn or using captions on social, it trivializes what's actually happening. So I continue to hold two positions. I'm very excited, but I also recognize that this is a rewriting of the rule book in every sense of the word.
Wow. One question, but to leverage from the technology, from the AI, as you described, because I think what you said about creative strategists and thinkers and designers, it's so true that, the technology, the AI would, you're going to tell what is the briefing, but you're still going to have to think what's the creative, what's the concept. But in order to use the technology to do it for you, you need to know how to prompt, right? How to use it. So so it's not as simple, because the way you are describing it seems when you're talking that is simple. I'm a creative, I'm design, I'm a strategist, I have the concept, I know what I want to do, I read the briefing, and I'm going to tell the technology to help me to conceptualize this and create that. But it's not as simple as we think, because we need to learn how to get the machine to learn what you wanted to do it.
100%. And you need to know what good is, what great is. Yes, we can use data to objectively say whether something's more effective, but there's a skill in marketing that's never talked about. There's a skill of being a tastemaker. Knowing what looks good, what sounds good, that is half the battle. Knowing where to look, being a critical thinker, knowing what to ask. And one of the things that I liken this to, if you think of an evolution of how we interface with technology, think of one of the biggest movements of the last 30 years is search. Search put order to the internet. Before the internet, you couldn't find things. What search did is it created a space where you could find, through crude keywords, you could find things. If you think of now in a generative era, when you remove discovery, so I now ask for something and I get the outcome. I don't need to discover and then go and then create. There's a world where you're removing all that friction. Suddenly we have to unlearn some of those behaviors. When I go now to find a Japanese restaurant in a new city, I basically misspell Japanese. I'll write very crude, like restaurant tonight in London, and it'll give me like five recommendations. If you do that in a generative model and a prompt, you will get the same answer as the next person, the same answer as the next person. My view is, if you want to get really unusual and great outcomes, you have to be very specific. You have to be, everything now is about training, it's about details. And actually, asking the right questions is a skill in itself. You have to have a lot of knowledge, a lot of expertise to know what to ask. So as much as I go, yes, this is an evolution, we've developed some unhealthy habits. That is the same reason why when most people use Midjourney, it doesn't look like the examples we see. When most people use any of the text to video models, it's not as good as what we see on LinkedIn. It's because you have professionals asking the questions and being very specific on what outcomes they want. So I think, again, marketeers that are great at their craft today, they are well placed to take advantage of this new productivity era, this new creative era, this new era where we have an army of perspectives and we have intelligence in our pockets.
And what would be the advice to then to go to that next evolution of the generative AI? Because they will have to learn in order to be able to apply into their day-to-day roles and jobs, right?
Yes.
How they can get there? How they can get then?
I think first thing you have to do is get over your own ego.
100%.
Your ego says to you, I know better.
Exactly.
And humans do this thing, it's called cognitive dissonance. We look at something and instead of facing the uncomfortable truth that the path this technology is on will do most things better than all of us at all times, it almost seems inevitable now. That's very unsettling. So you'd rather lie to yourself and say, no, it's a fad, it's one of those things. The right thing to do is you have to have humility, number one. And then number two, all of this stuff is new. Anything I tell you with extreme confidence is because I've spent 1.5 2 years experimenting, testing my way to the right answer, being curious about what comes next. And if you start with humility and then you have the appetite to go experiment and go learn, you will enhance everything you do. I'm a big believer that young people have so many advantages in the
100%.
world. I talk about digital leverage. If you're a young person and you're native with these tools and you're at the start of your career, you can leapfrog so many people by simply being very adept and doing things faster and integrating this into your work and your ideas and so many things. So yeah, I think for the right type of mindset, if you get over your ego and you overcome the natural resistance that exists with change, I think the opportunity is significant for you.
It is. It's just like it's so interesting that you were talking about adapt and having the uncomfortable truth of the change that technology is bringing to us. But if you stop to think, this is not just happening now. This happens all the time. Even when we start with internet a few years ago, we had to adapt because now we have an internet. We can access news all around the world. And then there was the social media when Facebook starts and Twitter, and then everyone's like, what is this?
Yeah, Adland rejected this. I used to go in and they'd say, yeah, it's not. They'd say it doesn't work as well, and we do this way. And I go, have you ever made a viral meme? Go tell me that doesn't work.
Exactly.
Have you ever done a paid ad? This is going back 10 years ago, and they'd be like, well, I haven't done one, but they'd have this resistance. And actually, that for me is more of a signal when you have incumbents that feel threatened by what could come next. That's a signal that I'm doing the right things. So when the world tells you, very skeptical.
I'm not so sure. Yeah, because for me, like now looking at the AI, generative AI, and technology, it reminds me about when the social media starts and the influencer market. So this is when I start MG. I was in a PR marketing world, working for luxury brands, and then I saw the rise of Facebook and Twitter, and then suddenly came Instagram with a photo sharing app. And I look at that and I was like, this is going to be how brands will be actually communicate. It's going to be like peer-to-peer rather than the brand. And then I remember when I was speaking to brands and, friends about it, people were saying that I was crazy. No way that, people will become advertisers. Like they will, because people trust more people than anything else. So now this conversation about AI really reminds me 10 years ago, because it feels like we are being introduced to new tools, new technology, new ways of thinking and adapting every year, all the time. And the resistance is just going to make you delay something that you're going to have to do. at some certain point, right? And TikTok is another great example. Remember when people say about TikTok, oh, TikTok is just for a young generation. It's just like an app for kids.
Music,
to
dancers,
music
silly.
and dancers. And I was like, guys, no, TikTok is going to be the big thing. And then brands did not listen to me. And then pandemic came. You start seeing every type of, kids and adults and families on TikTok. And then what happened after pandemic? TikTok became the biggest social app for brands to advertise.
Absolutely. It was a Trojan horse because people dismissed it.
It
was kids even. And I always used to say the exact same thing of you. Yes, there are a lot of kids on there. And actually, you should look to young people, how they behave. Young people influence culture. They influence what charts. They influence absolutely everything. To trivialize that was a huge mistake. And, when people used to say, should I have a TikTok strategy? Because they would always wait for their competitor to move first.
Exactly.
They wanted the rule book to be written. And I always used to say, well, you're already late. The next best thing is like start today. And this was going back years after years after years of saying, go on this. Inject just 10% of your energy in trying new things. Yes, the majority of what you do has to be robust, solidified, but you always have to leave room for experimentation. And if you don't create that space, you will miss out on what inevitably will be the next big opportunity.
Exactly. And it's all about test and learn, right?
Yes.
Because, and I like giving the percentage, the space to test new things. And then it's all about test and learn and failing and then doing it and again. And I think that's kind of like what's happening right now with generative AI. It's just like, it's not just to see the optimistic about, the positive about it, but seeing the negative as well, as you said, and be very realistic on the impact that it's going to cause in the industry, on people's job. But look at this as more as an opportunity and embrace rather than resist.
Yeah, and I even think it goes bigger than that with AI, in the sense that social media changed society in so many ways. It impacts political discourse.
A lot.
Businesses, new business models were created. The way we communicate. We now gave power to an individual to have a voice that wasn't gate-kept behind media entities and publishers. So this was a huge disruptor across so many things. You go one step further with intelligence. Intelligence is the one thing that has been preserved in humanity throughout our entire history. And now, a different type of intelligence, but something there challenges that. When Obama was asked about AI, what his perspective on the developments, he likened it to electricity. And you think, how much did electricity change society? Sam Altman, founder of OpenAI, he's a bit of a contrarian figure because I don't trust the guy because he's altruistic. And when someone's too altruistic, you go, what's your real agenda?
Yes.
You don't own shares. You're not trying to make... What's your real agenda? It's usually power, right?
Yeah.
So I don't 100% trust him. But when he was asked the question about how much AI is going to change the world, he zoomed out and he said... He didn't answer. He just said, well, let me describe the economy today. There are two big costs in the economy across every field. One is energy. The other is intelligence. And he meant, what is the cost to produce and create everything around us? Energy. And then he said, what is the cost of human ingenuity, intelligence to create and produce everything around us? And he then said, if one of those costs, intelligence, goes to almost zero, what happens? And he just left that. And when you think that at a societal foundational level, it really does change everything. So I have a very strong point of view how marketing may be affected in the next 2 to 3 years. I have a strong point of view how professional services can take advantage of all the advancements in the field. I have no idea what happens beyond that, because this really is something new. Like in a very small way, social media started as a thing to connect us and create better online experiences. The unintended consequence was phone addiction, the rise in the mental health crisis, the pressure that everybody puts on themselves. All of these things were never intended. It started really simply. With AI, we'll go through some similar unintended consequences, and the power for those could be very significant. So I don't go down that rabbit hole too far because it's way beyond my comprehension. However, I do think it's symbolic of every government around the world, the entire financial institutions, the entire tech and startup community are all building and paying attention. If that is all happening and you don't pay attention to this thing now, I think you're missing a trick.
Ollie, you talk about a lot of, I feel like looking at you, observing you speaking, you have a lot of sense of psychology, and you use a lot of psychology words into when you're, trying to explain. And then moving from that conversation to leadership, because the way you're talking about the humility, the resistance from teams, and how AI can support creative instincts and strategies. How you, as the leader, manage those changes into, industry technologies and innovations to pass that confidence that you're passing now to me on this conversation to your team as the leader, because you're saying you have to step back and you have to look at it as an opportunity, take your ego away, embrace and test. But to say that
and to do are two different things.
It's very easy, but to do is a very different thing. And you are, co-founder of an agency. You have, a big team around you. So how do you engage your team on this change for them to embrace with the same mindset that you are talking to me right now?
Yeah, and on your first point, one of the reasons I love marketing is because for me, marketing is the intersection between business and psychology. I've always been fascinated with how I think, how my loved ones think, people around me, what makes us feel, what makes us behave. So marketing felt like a very natural evolution of that, because I have an interest in business and I want to understand people. And that's exactly what we do. That's where that sits. In terms of leadership, it's really interesting because people will talk about how you should behave. My general thesis is really simple. I try and treat people and conduct myself in a way how I'd want to be treated. I value honesty over everything else. So I won't shy away from the fact that I would say to our creative teams and designers that I think the art of what you do and the skill you possess now will be redundant in 3 years.
Do you say that?
Yes, I say this publicly and I'm okay. But my job is to then support and help them and show that there is space to fail. So whenever a team member goes and tries a new tool, and we have a space in our internal comms called Ever-Changing Landscape, and it's our most active group. And the idea is, me as a leader, I have to show that I value that behavior of someone testing, failing, experimenting, sharing something in this space about something new that's happening in the world. So the things I do is I'm often sending people messages direct, love that share. Or I have to really be in the weeds of telling people. But foundationally, I have two principles. I try and be very honest by speaking my truth. It might not be the truth, but it's what I believe. And that's all you can conduct yourself. But I always believe you have to, there's a Persian philosopher poet called Rumi, and there's a quote that says, before you speak any words, you let it pass through 3 gates. Is it true? Is it nice, and is it effective? So the point being is it might be true, you need to say it in a nice way, and the third point is it going to be effective? Because I could tell you something that's true, and if it's not going to get the desired outcome, why say it?
Why just say?
Yeah, so you kind of have to let your words pass through those gates. So, yeah, to go back to, I don't think as leaders you have to overcomplicate things.
Do you think in average leadership is
I think you're dealing with people. We all want the same things in our professional endeavors. We want to be challenged. We want to feel safe. We want opportunities. We all want the same things.
In a different order.
In some people in different orders,
orders.
yeah. But I generally believe most of us want those foundations. And even if we don't expressively, or we haven't identified that's the thing we want, it's interesting, you'll have seen this, when sometimes, one of the things that I used to make a real habit of doing this is whenever there was an exit interview, I wouldn't leave it to HR, I would do it myself, alongside HR. But I do it because I think people are going to be their most honest when they leave a business. And I would ask 3 questions. You know, if there's one thing here, what do we protect at all costs? If there's just one thing, just give me one thing that you say you value this and this made your experience better. If there was one thing you would change, what would that be? And the third was like, is there anything I should know about your particular experience or decision to leave? What was it that led? And I was shocked the amount of times where people's decision to leave was somewhat rooted in a frustration over what I deemed to be like a nice thing for the company. And I'll give you one like really crude example. It was like, years ago, we did unlimited holidays. And everybody used to come and say, I never felt like I had ownership of it. I'd be judged if I took more holidays. And that transformed how I think about Flight Story. I go, okay, well, the intention was to be generous and give people autonomy to make their own decisions. People don't want full autonomy. They want guardrails. They want structure, and they want it to be fair and equal for everybody. But by giving something ambiguous and open, people had a problem. So it was a nice, kind act that people either thought was cynical or they didn't like. Or they
felt that if they take any amount of days at all time, they would be judged.
And their peers would judge them, the manager would judge them. And this is like the nuance of leadership. I think as a leader, you always just have to be listening. And you have to have humility to go, you know what, I thought this was the right thing, I was wrong. And if you conduct yourself in an honest way, you have integrity, the humility, they're the foundations to be able to be a good leader. And then it's like, set the right example. I hear like startups always try and be that person that they are in 5 years. They behave in a certain way. They go, I have to delegate everything. I have to do this. And I go, at some point, yes. But you know what? There's nothing better than leading from example. Never ask anyone to do anything you wouldn't do yourself. And I think that's how you build the trust and the relationships with
I love everything you're saying. And then I think, but leadership as well, when it comes to make difficult decisions, right? Yes. Is when you're challenged the most. And then I think from the experience that I've been going through the past few months.
Yeah.
And I have to make a very tough decisions in terms of, restructuring, sizing of the business. And is this when, as a leader, you need to be very strong on, the decisions that you're taking, because at the end of the day, it's not that you're doing good for you're doing good for the business. But I think that's, from my experience, this is the time that I felt that I was more challenged and isolated because there was just so much judgment on the decisions that you're taking by being that leader that has to be sometimes doing great things for the business, but at the end of great things for people, but at being times that you have to change things in order to make the business better. And then for me, there was a struggle because I was just like, wow, I'm not doing this because I'm a bad leader or because I don't care for this person. Not. It's just, it is at the end of the day, it is a business. And that exactly what you said. You feel so isolated because you go like, I'm not doing something that is no other leaders and founders and owners that they do, because I think there's this business. And then I had to navigate a very tough, period to see employees, that were there with a long time with us, but at the time you need to make a difficult business decision, they judge you in a sense that you start questioning.
And you know what? I think that's okay. The reason that that's such a heavy burden is because you're not a psychopath. Like, if you were a psychopath, you'd be completely detached from the idea of affecting someone's life and people that have committed to you. And that's normal. You care, you're compassionate, so it should bother you. The difference I would make, and the switch point for me, I'm very much like that, an empath. So I would wear people, like the idea of making a tough decision that impacts someone's life, even if it's unavoidable, is very difficult. The reason that I think you can come to terms with it is if we have to let 30% of our team members go that we love, I'm doing this to protect the 70% of people here that are going to remain. And that reframing of the same outcome completely transforms and allows you to act and behave and make the right decisions. It's so normal to just feel that. And if you didn't, I would question that there's probably something wrong with you, right? Like all those feelings, but you have to be kind to yourself, because you'll never be an effect unless you're kind on yourself first. It's like your first foundation is always you, your health, the same for everybody. And to make right decisions, you need to be in the right frame of mind.
Leadership versus creating a marketing strategy. What is the toughest? What's for you?
Oh, marketing's easy. Marketing doesn't always work. Marketing doesn't always work. I love this, where it's like it's a lot of, I think this is going to work based on education, experience, guesses, data, insight. Fundamentally, it doesn't. And sometimes it's magical. Leadership is very difficult because, to your point, heavy lays the crown. You have to make tough decisions that impact people's lives. But equally, you get to choose your struggle.
You have to choose your struggle.
You choose your struggle, and it's there's nothing more rewarding than seeing people grow. Like, genuinely, it seems like this fugazi kind of story you tell yourself. The proudest moments are like when you have your team and you see someone who you've given an opportunity to go on to achieve amazing things with you on their next chapter. Those things, you get so much from that, and that's a real privilege of leadership. But God, entrepreneurship's hard.
It's hard.
Very hard. It's easy when everything's going well, by the way.
Yes.
When you're growing, everything's going well. The minute things get hard and there's no money in the bank and, somethinging's over there and this person's complaining and disaster strikes here. Yeah, people don't know the narrow focus. They
don't know.
But you get to choose. It's a privilege. I still think it's a privilege.
So I think it's tough. People don't see the behind the scenes.
Of course not.
But I love it because I think it's challenging me all the time in different levels, different experience, different everything. But it's not for everyone.
Yes, my friend is a year into their entrepreneurial journey. They've built a tech platform. Previously, they were an independent recruiter in a very specialist field. They said to me, I was traveling the world around Bali. In my best year, I earned $500,000. In 1 year, I was working part-time. Now I have no money. I've spent all my money on this business. I work, 18 hours a day or whatever. Why did I choose this? And I went, but are you rewarded and fulfilled? And she went, yes. So, you
have to present that.
You're either lying to yourself or
present him to me, please, so we can have
but I think it's very normal, and it should
normal.
be, right. I think it's audacious to think that you can create value out of nothing against competition. Marketing's so competitive. Tens of thousands of people doing similar things. For you to go on and have an outlier success, you almost have to have a delusional optimism. 100%. You have to have a confidence. You have to be comfortable in all the inevitable chaos. That's kind of the founder of NVIDIA. He came out and he said the number one skill he looks for in anyone is resilience.
This is the number one that I look is resilience.
So important.
It's so important. I think resilience and ensure that the vision that you have it's there all the time, not losing the why you're doing this.
Yes.
And then when you are very attached to the why, then you can build your resilience in a way that you wouldn't even think that you would be able to do, because what's the purpose of you doing this. And then you're gonna go through like the ups and downs of the life of an entrepreneur and a leader. But resilience for me is definitely the number one.
100%. And he said 30 years ago when he started the business, it's now one of the most valuable companies in the world, with going on to be a 3 trillion market cap. It's up there with the titans of tech. And when he was asked, if you were backing that coffee shop with your friends talking about starting this thing again, what advice would you have? His advice was, I wouldn't do it. The pain, the suffering of the last 30
and why
years.
I'm asking you this question about leadership and resiliency, and then the behind the scenes that people don't know, the ups and downs, the challenge, the cash in the bank, the client that don't renew, the retainer that does not want to continue to be a retainer, the pitch that you need to do, the competitions, and the team that you have to make sure that everyone is happy, that you're providing the culture, the structure, the empathy, and the values, and is all that together. Because you've been at Social Chain first, and then with Steven, and then you both left, and then you not start again, but you're going into a new adventure with Flight Store, right?
Yes.
So it's not that because you both had an incredible, experience and successful at Social Chain, and then time passed, things change, and then you guys decided to do again, but differently. What's the lesson from Social Chain that you're applying to Flight Story, if there's any?
So to your earlier point around motivation, one of the motivations was always, you now have a period that you can reflect and say, I'm really proud of that. I got fulfillment from that. What do I truly like to do? And I love marketing, I love business, I love technology. There's things I'm passionate about, but fundamentally, I like to build things with people that I like being around. I spend a lot of time working, so I want to be around people that give me fuel, that we share ideas, we build, and I want to do great work. I want to do the best possible work we can. I want to feel pride in everything we put out. Anything that leaves our walls, I want to have pride in that. So that's what gives me fuel. So upon starting Flight Story, our viewers, we have all these experiences. We'll steal and take what we understood and what we got fulfillment, but we now have experience and more resources to be able to do it faster and better.
Oliver, I think we're going to have to wrap up our conversation, and it's been an amazing, very insightful. I've learned a lot from you. I love your podcast. We were just talking before we started the podcast about how good is your podcast, and then I think today hopefully everyone enjoyed and learned a lot from you. But before we finish, I want to say thank you. We've met a year ago, I think, and then since then we've been in touch, and I think we clicked. And then when we met, I was going through a very turbulent period of my business, and you were so kind, so generous. And then I think everyone that's watching this episode today can see that you're not just a good leader and a very expert in what you do, but you have a great heart. And I think that's the combination that makes you so successful in everything you do. Because I think leadership is not just about being a good leader or being very good at what you do. Is the combination of being a good person, a good soul, and a good heart. And then the fact that you have supported in the ways you could to help me to go through that, crazy momentum, which now it's all good because the resilience made me to be where I am here right now, and the passion that the work that I do. So thank you, because
thank you.
We're both, working from different agencies. People can see this and say, oh, but you guys are competitors. Why you're doing this podcast and talking with someone that's also a co-founder of an agency? Because there is no competitor in this world, because everyone has different skills, different ways of serving clients, and we never know the future.
There's enough opportunity
for everyone.
Absolutely.
And you were just one of the kindest from the industry
you.
that I've met recently. So thank you so much for being here, and hopefully that everyone has enjoyed this conversation with amazing Oliver, and hope to see you soon. Make sure to download apps to watch our podcast on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and YouTube. And I see you on our next episode. Oliver, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Love the conversation.
Yes, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much.